Well, good morning and welcome to our webinar this morning. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you as we walk through some systems and processes and thoughts and ideas around mastering SAP change management. And today we're particularly looking at it a little later in the webinar anyway, through the eyes of automation. But first, let's just take a quick look at what we're going to do today. So after a brief introduction, we're going to talk a little bit about why mastering SAP change management matters. We're then going to discuss several of the restrictions and limitations that we do know about when we are trying to improve and master SAP change management. We'll then look at how we can accelerate and overcome these restrictions through automation. Now, there is an area in your webinar box where you can type in questions. So if you have a question, ask it along the way. We'll get some time at the end, hopefully, to answer questions. If I'm unable to answer the question or we don't have time, we will get back to you as well. So keep in mind also that you will receive a follow-up email, and you can respond to that email with additional questions. I will mention a certain piece of documentation on the way through the webinar. You might want to ask to receive some of those as well. Some of those will be listed in the slide deck when you receive it later on. So we do have a bit to get through, so let's get started. I'll just tell you a little bit about who we are and who I am. So my name is Rick. I'm Rick Porter. I'm the Vice President of Business Development. I've been with Revelation Software Concepts, the sponsor of today's webinar, for almost 17 years now. And I've spoken with many hundreds of SAP customers and IT teams around their change management systems and processes. And so, we've seen the best and we've seen the worst of it. So we feel we certainly do have some information that we can share across the board as well. So Revelation Software Concepts has been developing and delivering change management automation for SAP IT teams since 1997. It was a pioneer then and is an innovator now, as we'll see a little later in the webinar. Our software solutions, so Rev-Trac and Rev-Trac Insights, have been designed to accelerate SAP IT teams towards achieving their required outcomes. These are specifically the ability to deliver high volumes of change at faster rates with improved quality. So in the end, their business customers can react quickly to market and regulatory changes with confidence. So to help us achieve that, we work with Gartner and a team of their hand-picked experts to ensure that our software is aligned to market demands and customer priorities. And this ensures really that our customers are receiving the most innovative, forward-thinking technology in the market. So on that, I do understand there are a number of attendees today who are Rev-Trac customers and Rev-Trac users, so a special welcome to you. Others of you may be contemplating looking at the software or thinking about how you might achieve some of the things we're talking about today. And I do hope that today's information will be of use to you and value. To set expectations, at the back end we will be talking about automating SAP change control, but there's no technical demonstrations today. It's just simply no time to be able to do that. But you can visit a web page which I will give you to have a look at a few brief software demonstrations, or you can simply ask for one at your convenience as well. So look, hopefully that's got the important advertising and those kind of things out the way. So we now need to move into the content, because that's really what we're here for today. So let's get really started. So why is mastering SAP change management so important anyway? And why would we spend an entire webinar on the subject? Because there's so many things we could talk about, but what we've learned is this really is very important. Business units do need to respond quickly to market and regulatory changes. There's really no option. It's a very fast moving world, and we've been saying these kind of things for years, I must admit, but nevertheless there does seem to be an acceleration. Businesses under enormous pressure to be able to achieve things and be very flexible and rapid. And that Darwinian comment about it's not the fittest who survive, it's actually those who adapt the best, seems to be becoming more and more true. So although we're seeing many SAP IT teams committing to doing things differently, on the whole, what we're not seeing are those internal changes to the way basic SAP changes are managed to actually achieve the kinds of outcomes needed. And without that, they will not be able to serve their business customers well at all. For example, some are adopting agile or DevOps methodologies in an effort to achieve the required outcomes, but it's estimated that this is less than 50% at the enterprise level, about 27% doing it reasonably committed to doing it now, around another 13% or so certainly looking at doing something within the next 12 months or so. But this means then that the other 50% are going to need to investigate alternative methods to remain competitive. And let's talk now a little about the kind of outcomes we're hearing SAP IT teams telling us that they need to achieve. Initially, there's a range of internal outcomes that the SAP IT team needs to do. So they need to, and this won't come as a surprise to anybody, I'm sure, higher volumes of change at increased rates of delivery with better quality at lower cost. And of course, the lower the risk, the better. If an SAP IT team can do this, then they'll be able to turn around their change requests very quickly. They'll be able to deliver their projects on time, and they'll be able to do this with minimized disruption to the business as well. And for the business, well, this is really where the rubber hits the road. They will be able to rapidly respond to market and regulatory changes. They will be able to display more innovation and be able to move towards those digital transformation goals far more quickly as well. However, unless an SAP IT team can master the basics of SAP change management, it will be difficult, if not impossible really, to deliver SAP application changes and enhancements and whatever else they do need to deliver any faster or any better than they are now. In short, the required outcomes we've just mentioned will prove to be elusive, and they will simply not be able to achieve them. So what is the problem then? Well, change is being managed today, and things are moving along. And so often we find that companies do often prefer to stick with the status quo, than make a decision to implement a new way of doing things, to implement a new software, to automate, to do things differently. So it becomes a bit of an internal issue. However, things like governance, things like change processes, transport management or transport deployments, the landscape architecture, the development methodologies used, and the quality requirements and so on, and various other elements of managing SAP changes can severely restrict the flow of change. Now, this will limit the outcomes, and so to keep it simple and provide a good overview on how we can do this. So just to break it down, basically, we're going to talk today about three groups of these restrictions. So we're going to talk around processes, we'll talk a little around the area of tasks, and about coordination. So each of these three areas will be familiar to you, and no, it certainly doesn't cover the whole range of issues and opportunities in around managing SAP change, that's for sure. But let's take a look initially. So if we're going to dig into the process, I'll spend a bit more time around process than the other areas because good process is the base of SAP change management mastery. If you got this wrong, then it really doesn't matter what else you do. These are fundamental. So we see there are three fundamental limitations in the ways that SAP IT teams organize their change processes. Firstly, we find teams who have too few processes. Worst case is one size fits all. And this is often necessary because the teams don't have the disciplines or the controls to effectively divide the work into the different process flows that would be more effective. The next we see is that their processes are too complex. This is often the case in an FDA regulated or highly regulated area, but this makes them wieldy, which encourages workarounds. It requires significant policing, and this actually adds to costs and risks and so on as well. So it's interesting, we find that we create complex change control processes because we need to govern things quite tightly. The end result, the users work around those processes and we have uncontrolled change. So there's a balance there that needs to be implemented as well. And the final one there is really where there's just too many change processes. It's confusing and misallocation becomes the norm, and users will just pick the one they know the best or pick the one managed by the person they get on well with the most, and once again the controls are out of there. So how does this affect the outcomes that we've actually mentioned? Well, we end up with poor quality, we end up disrupting the production systems and the business use of that. We find there are too few changes being delivered, or the turnaround times are too slow. And then if we do get the processes right, there are a range of other things that work around those that make it also very difficult. So things like poor discipline are just people not doing what they're supposed to do. And if you've worked with an outsource organization or a part of an outsource organization, it can be difficult to synchronize the two methodologies of thinking. And so discipline becomes very important. We all have stories, and I heard one not too long ago of a outsource partner had a developer who developed a small program, popped it into production. Next thing they knew that all of that company, it was a very large beverage company in the UK, that company had every one of its suppliers paid for the second time on the same invoice, excuse me, that week. Now they're the types of things that poor discipline can result in. We spoke earlier about processes that are wieldy. This can result in workarounds. If we have workarounds, well, we know what that means. Misallocation of changes. It's not an emergency change, but it's allocated to an emergency process, or it's a small enhancement of high risk, but it's run down the low risk process. So those things happen, or missed steps in the process, missed approvals, missed testing steps and so on. And if one wants to stand on top of every person in the chain, then the cost of policing and making sure that happens is just too high. And so this then results in things like, once again, poor quality, or disrupted users, high costs, and of course then reduced resource availability for anything else. So here I've shown that getting the process right is fundamental to mastering SAP change management, and how getting it wrong can actually really severely limit the IT teams to deliver as required. So I want to spend some time now talking around the area of tasks. The tasks associated with getting things done and getting things into production. Managing tasks inside SAP, as you know, it requires people, usually lots of them, to do lots of things. In the change management area, particularly things like moving paper and unmonitored email around the team for approvals, relying on individuals to alert the next one in line. So that's manual workflow. Often the idea of manual workflow equals no flow. And so things get stuck, they don't get moved. It's on someone else's desk. I was with a customer not too long ago. It was a FDA regulated customer. They had 2 development sites, and they said they had to automate because they had to do things differently, because they could not any longer ferry backwards and forwards between the 2 sites the approval forms. So I had in my mind pictured a little guy on a Vespa scooter with a pizza delivery box on the back full of change control forms, ferrying them backwards and forwards all day. So that's perhaps an extreme example, but you've seen these things happen inside your own organisation. So manual workflow can often mean no flow or expensive flow. Basis teams, full-time on moving transports, investigating errors, understanding why something's not working anymore in the production system and so on, often for moving things that were untested and unproven, but it lands on their desk because they did the migration, it's their fault. Often not the case. So project management officers, release managers, transport coordinators scouring pages of spreadsheets, looking for errors and sequence issues, and then of course when the buttons hit to move to production, there's closed eyes, crossed fingers, and hoping for the best as well. Now, the experience, well, this often results in production system errors, significant speed limits, and once again, high costs. Unfortunately, without automation, which I'll be covering fairly soon, there's not much you can actually do about this one. It is what it is. You can try and streamline your processes as best you can, but if one's going to run them manually, then manual is the way that you do it, and they will come with their limitations as well. So let's now talk a little bit about the sort of restrictions around coordinating of efforts. You know, managing high volumes of change at high speed without the right processes in place, it can be likened really to a maxi yacht sailing at full speed for the rocks. It's all very exciting today, but trouble is certainly coming. And so here are 3 or 4 change management areas around synchronization and coordination that do need to be mastered if one's going to go full tilt and still avoid hitting the rock. So these are things around like managing parallel development. High volume change management will mean that many of the same objects will be in various states of change and at various stages of delivery all the time. So keeping visibility across these systems and the development teams to keep these in control will be vital if one's going to manage high volumes of change. The same goes for managing dependencies, both dependencies within the change and dependencies on other objects outside the change being changed. It's not an easy task, but it's a necessary one nonetheless that needs to occur. The third one up there, of course, is keeping transports in their correct sequence. This is inversely proportional to the volume of change being managed. The higher the volume of change, the higher the number of sequencing issues, of course. So get these 3 wrong, and bad return codes, overtake errors, and poor production stability result, and there's huge amounts of time spent trying to fix up what actually went wrong. The end result, of course, is that volume and velocity outcomes might be met, but the quality and cost outcomes are not. So these things do need to be kept in consideration as well. So we've had a look now at the key area, or some of the key areas of mastering SAP, things around the areas of processes, getting the process right, about getting the disciplines around managing those processes right. We've spoken a little now about things like the tasks that need to go on and need to be automated. And now we've just spent some time talking a little bit about the areas of coordination and getting the technical areas right as well. So I guess then if one knew that there was a way where one could simply and easily automate and enforce all the tasks and processes that are associated with delivering these high quality, high volumes of change faster than one could today, I'm sure you would want to know about it. So let's revisit these 3 areas we've just covered: processes, tasks, and coordination from an automation perspective, and see how relatively simple it is with the right tools and processes in place to master SAP change management. So once again, I won't be showing any software demos in here. I thought about to try and find a way to be able to do that, but timing and technology was going to make that a little difficult. But as I mentioned, we have a number of short video demos available for you. We will send you the link and you can go and check those out there. If you like what you see, you can always ask for a more in-depth demonstration as well. So Let's look at overcoming process limitations as well. We need the right mix of processes. We need to be able to enforce those processes, and we need to be able to do that without increasing the cost. Now, by fully automating our change control processes, even to the point of the software automatically allocating certain types of changes to pre-configured processes, things like those poor disciplines we spoke about earlier, the workarounds that seem to happen quite often, the misallocations of changes to the wrong processes, missing steps in the process, and the cost of policing. These things can all become things of the past. So, for example, once Rev-Trac is fully implemented, a user cannot save a change unless it's attached to a pre-approved Rev-Trac request. So already the things like the discipline is overcome, the workaround is overcome. There are ways to overcome misallocations as well. And of course, once it's in the process, things like electronic signature approvals and automated workflow approval will ensure that steps are not missed. Major benefit here is that the cost of policing actually goes down. So we have our high quality, which is what we want. Disruptions are minimized. Our costs are lower. Resources are freed up to do other things. And so by overcoming process limitations through automation, there's a whole range of issues that just go away through the automation process. So in the background, you need to be able to understand your processes. So as you can see here, we've got two processes. They're similar, but they're quite different. You would not run changes down the left-hand side if they needed to go down the right-hand side, or vice versa. And so best practice automation, you'll have a number of processes configured, ready to automatically process every type of change that you might need to put through the system. They don't need to be complex. For example, collated from our anonymous customer data, our averaged information tells us that over 80% of change is managed by just 5 or fewer processes. So we do have some customers who've got many processes configured into their systems, but in the whole, it's just the basic 5 that get used. So here's an example of 5 types of change, and there would be 5 processes built around these change. So if you implemented and adhered to these 5, you could easily manage more than 80% of your changes across your landscape. So having these in place, fully automated, and you really are well on the way to mastering SAP change management and the delivery outcomes required. Just a quick reminder that if you do want to ask a question, we're nearing towards the conclusion of the webinar, so begin to pop those questions in the question box there, and we can answer those for you shortly. So moving on to that big area of automating tasks, there are so many manual tasks that can be automated with the right SAP change management automation software. There's no way I can list them all here, but look, here are some of the main ones. We have, so we can automate the workflow. We can automate electronic workflows, automated transport deployment with automated safety checks, and I'll cover those in the next slide or two. Leaving an automated audit trail. Our customers tell us that their audits now have gone from utilizing lots of people's times for days and sometimes weeks down to just the auditor spending a few hours in their Rev-Trac change request area just to see what happened and why. Automated reapplication. There's so much time wasted by so many in rekeying activities that could be spent writing new enhancements rather than rekeying existing ones. We find that often in just this one automation area alone, one can justify the changing from the status quo manual processes to an automated way of doing things. In fact, we have one customer who reported to us that they were saving literally hundreds of developer days on every release simply through intelligent automation. And as a website that you can go to, I will give you the link for that, where you can read lots of different things that customers who are using Rev-Trac today have got to say about Rev-Trac. So important here, Rev-Trac has streamlined and automated our change management operations with considerably less effort, while facilitating significantly more work and throughput. It's almost as if I could have just taken this and said, this is what we're doing today, because these are the outcomes that are possible through good SAP change management automation and mastering the basics as well. So let's look at automation around coordination. Once again, the list of possibilities is long, but here are a few. So things like cross-system locking. This was initially designed to prevent parallel development, but now we use this to keep parallel development visible, to manage it, because, as I mentioned earlier, with high volumes of change, parallel development is happening, and so you need to be keeping it visible and under control. And so to help with that, parallel development workbench, this is designed for development leaders to keep an eye on and manage parallel developments as they flow across the landscape. Other things like dependency and impact checking. It's very difficult to know what object depends on other objects. And with objects being changed in a high volume, high velocity change environment, there will be objects that you are referencing that are being changed. And so you need to be able to understand those, pop those into your production system, and the bad return code results because things aren't actually right there. Things like cloning and auto reapplication, I spoke about that task a little earlier, and the impact that that can have on your development resources is amazing. And of course, managing releases, managing sprints, and so on is also becoming really important. You get these things right, and your change quality will literally go through the roof. So, things like your volume and velocity, they will be up, but also your quality and your costs will be under control as well. So once again, another quote from our customer, and where they considered how the Rev-Trac has assisted them achieve the type of things that we've been speaking about today. So if you can master SAP change management with or without automation, achieving the outcomes that you require will be far more likely than it is now. So things like those high volumes of change at faster rates, at better quality and lower cost will be possible. You will be able to turn around things more quickly, more likely to deliver on time. The disruption that often one is criticized for will be minimized. And then, of course, the business customer can achieve the ends that they need to as well. They can respond more quickly to what's going on. If they have to change things rapidly for regulatory compliance, they can. If they're looking to put new innovative things out to the customers, they can. And of course, the move towards the digital transformation that everybody seems to be impressing upon us is important will happen as well. So once again, being able to move changes more frequently at higher quality to a production environment is the goal, and that is what mastering SAP change management can do. And of course, doing that through automation is going to be far easier. So if you have a question, let's ask that question now. Once again, just type it in the questions box there. I will respond to those. So at the moment, no one's actually felt the need to ask a question, and that's okay. So that means we don't need to labour over something that needs to go longer than necessary. But if you have a question, feel free to ask that. Often a question we do get asked is how long does it actually take to implement something like Rev-Trac and get it up and running? We would usually find that within 2 weeks, a customer will be using Rev-Trac productively, at least across one of their SAP applications and with one or two of the most important processes. And that usually takes an expert consultant, just one of those 2 weeks to do that. A couple of customer Rev-Trac administrators then working together fairly consistently for another month or two, would then be able to roll the rest of the processes out across the rest of their application. So as far as SAP projects goes, Rev-Trac is a very simple, very easy project. Now, of course, if you're working in an extreme environment where you have lots of processes, it's highly regulated, well, things may take a little bit longer, of course. But if you're just a simple, relatively, even a 3-tier landscape, by 3 or 4, you'll find the timeframes I've spoken out well and truly within the capability of the product. So let's just move towards a summary then. So what we've mentioned is that if SAP IT teams are going to experience the outcomes that they need to, then they're going to need to master their SAP change management. We covered not 4, but 3 areas of that can restrict or limit an SAP IT team's ability to achieve these outcomes. But then we showed how automation can overcome each of these restrictions to enable you and your teams to achieve the outcomes that they need. And those outcomes that we mentioned as well. And of course, it has a significant impact on the business if you can get those right. Also has a significant impact, unfortunately, if you get those wrong. So in conclusion, thank you for joining. You can contact us for demos or take a look at this particular link. You'll get this slide deck. If you're concerned about the cost effectiveness of automation, there's a simple savings calculator that you just get some idea. We can then follow that up with something more detailed for you. If you're interested in what Rev-Trac customers have got to say, well, here's a link to go to a validated area where there's a number of quotes, case studies, examples and tables of the sorts of things that are available and possible through Rev-Trac. So thank you very much for your time today. I do appreciate life is busy, and so for you to take 30 minutes or so out of your day to spend with us today is amazing. So thank you. I trust the rest of your day goes well, and until next time, that's goodbye from me.